I usually kind of lurk in the chat room, but just to get us started, thank you all so much for joining my talk today. My name is Chris Hidalgo, and this is my ISO 27001, A Beginner's Guide. So quick introduction slide, really who am I? I'm going on 4 years in the GRC space. I've gotten my Sec Plus, CISA, and I'm currently pending my experience requirement for that ISO 27001 lead auditor. I actually started in GRC software, transitioned into an IT auditor role, working with like banks and other financial institutions. And I had quite a bit of experience in like NIST and CIS. I now work as a GRC analyst, specifically working in ISO 27001 and its supporting standards. So why this talk? The reviews are mixed. Anyone here know who Dr. Gerald Osher is? I'm sure we all do. It kills me to see this Discord post. I know it's about 2 years old now. I asked him for permission to see this, to share this as part of my presentation, but kills me to see ISO is hot trash. They're not keeping up with current trends in the information security space. And it's like, I get it. He might be 2 drinks in. He says he's a little saucy here, but I get it. ISO seems to be a little bit behind the curve on there. I do want to kind of dispel a lot of that feeling. So I took his spicy take here as the driving force for this talk. I get it. NIST, CSF, CIS, they're awesome control frameworks, but you can't get certified in them. So that's really where that ISO 27001 has that distinct advantage in being a certification in itself, but then also preparing your security program for other stringent audits like a SOC 2. Reality is audits and maintaining your security program are expensive. You might as well have a certification to show for it. So also why this talk, the cost of learning those standards. So Chris actually reached out to me about developing some documents or resources because there is, a demand for people to figure out how to learn these standards or purchase them, acquire them by some means. I really will go into not recommending that later on. But it was designed for the Simply Cyber and Study GRC Discord communities to give free legal resources for ISO 27001. I do want to say, even if you do require these in some way, you still need additional resources to understand how to implement those controls and audit. So another caveat to that is ISO 27001 implementation becomes bespoke to your organization. So really, it's going to be completely custom to your specific compliance needs and business processes. Our agenda for today, I wanted to give an overview of the ISO 27001 and 27002 document standards. We're going to be looking over some of those job roles that are just like pre-baked in for GRC professionals or more on the defensive side of things. So we'll also cover how that information security management system or ISMS is structured. You will see, I will use that acronym throughout the talk. So forgive me if I just say ISMS repeatedly. It's much easier and rolls off the tongue that way. We'll be talking about how the ISMS is implemented and certified. I'll be giving you some resources on skilling up in ISO 27001. And then I wanted to wrap up with communities to further your ISO 27001 knowledge and be able to actively contribute to. So some quick ISO 27001 definitions. We have that information security management system, that ISMS. It really is just your security program, just like those other frameworks that we've seen with NIST. They call it a management system because ISO has multiple standards spanning across anything that they deem as a management system. You'll have a quality management system, you'll have an AI management system, or a privacy information management system. So they coined that term management system. It's really a security program. Annex A, so this is a list of controls. It's really like a catalog at the end of that standard. There's going to be some guidance recommendations, and we'll go into a little bit more depth on that. I really like to think of it as that 853 for ISO. It's a full list of controls. You may or may not implement them into your specific organization. Statement of applicability. So this is actually going to be that formal list of all those Annex A controls, and your organization is going to document whether they are included or excluded, and then provide full justification and support for whatever decision you've made. So think of it as kind of like building your organization profile if you're coming from like the NIST CSF side of the house. Just kind of, it's your bespoke scope of controls. TLDR of the ISO 27001 and 27002. That 27001 document is really those shall requirements. So these are absolutely, you must have these to establish your ISMS and get certified as an ISO 27001 compliant system. It's going to formally establish those functions, and we'll see later on that like GRC analyst roles are pre-baked into these functions. So there's a lot of opportunity for like job security in a lot of ways, whether you're in the internal audit space like me, or if you're leaning more towards the risk route. These are absolute requirements that you have to keep the system functioning. And yes, plenty of work to keep you busy. ISO 27002, these are going to be those should guidance statements. So I know a lot of people joke like, oh, you can ignore those. Not quite. This is going to be covering all those Annex A controls that we saw like at the end of 27001, but then in more detail on how to implement it, some of the best practices regarding those controls. And you don't have to use the ISO 27002 guidance specifically. You're allowed to use really any control framework as long as you're justifying how they're meeting those 27001 requirements. Quick warning here. So regardless of what control framework you use for your statement of applicability, you have to document these controls and how they're implemented. So like from policy to procedure, you have to show every step along the way how they're documented and reviewed against the standard. So how is an ISMS structured? I pulled this list from Advisoro, which is one of my main resources for free ISO 27001 content. I could rattle off these main lists. So these are called clauses within the standard, and they go from clause 4 through 10. Instead of rattling off these and kind of going through a list, I'm going to save that for another talk or for a resource I have planned later on. I wanted to show y'all how these really like interfit within your program and just kind of like the support structure of how those connect. So I've developed this diagram. Looks pretty similar, hopefully, to other things y'all have seen. This is how I've mapped out how an ISMS is generally structured. So let's start from the top. You'll have your risk assessment. So you're evaluating the risks unique to your organization, how you plan on treating those risks, how you're wanting to apply your controls. So then you tick to the clockwise, you're performing your risk processes. So really, after you've applied your controls, it's business as usual. So these are your business processes working as intended. As you move along, you're going to be continuously monitoring those processes. And that's where like internal auditors like me come in. We're making sure that we aren't failing our own requirements, our own procedures, making sure that we are like sticking to exactly how we state we do things. From there, you move to nonconformity and corrective action. So when things go sideways, either through internal audit or through, say, incidents or any other kind of things that fall off your standards, that's where that nonconformity is identified. And then you'll proceed with corrective action. So you'll have this cycle here, just constantly turning. And then you start over. You reassess current risks, you apply new controls or enhance your controls, monitor, correct. On the outside of that layer, I wanted to cover some things that are just enforcing this process to keep going. So at the risk assessment level, you're going to have that leadership role. You're going to have your CISO up there. You're going to have your risk management, your executive leadership. They're going to be setting that tone at the top. You'll have your general risks to your organization. You'll have, say, like compliance requirements out there. You'll have your overall objectives as a business, and then your supporting roles. So you'll have your CISO, you'll have your risk analysts, you'll have qualified personnel needed to manage your information security management system. On the business risk or the like business process side, you'll have that operational planning. So planning how these processes are put in place and how they're controlled. A little bit of duplicate here. You'll continue to have that monitoring and measurement and internal audit function, but I wanted to add this management review. So as you're identifying these nonconformities or like process failures, there needs to be a path to escalate those up to management, and then that they are kept in tune to what is failing and how to go about correcting it. And then overlaying on that nonconformity and corrective action, you'll have continuous improvement. So continual improvement is one of the pillars of an ISMS. You're in this state constantly improving along the way and enhancing your program. So a little on the nose here. Does this look familiar to anyone? I purposely made this to mirror that NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0, just to draw that connection, saying like, hey, if you have experience in NIST, it also applies to ISO here. One thing that I wanted to note here is, although NIST CSF has gotten praise for explicitly stating like governance requirements in the 2.0 framework. NIST has been doing this like the last decade. So, I mean, take that what you will. It's really not a NIST versus ISO 27001. It's just, there's a lot more similar there than there are differences. One example I wanted to show you is just kind of a live example of information ISMS in a modern company. I know it kind of is considered like it's outdated or it's controls. And it's like GitLab is really, I feel, on the forefront of a lot of kind of modern practices, and they include a lot of their documentation just openly available. So if you wanted to see how an ISMS looks like in the wild, you can hop in and view their handbook to an extent without logging in, but you can review just kind of how they've structured it. It's a great case study if you wanted to look at, this is how I would plan out an ISMS, or this is how I would approach auditing an ISMS. So you'll be able to kind of trace along their steps there. One of my colleagues actually mentioned that in the spirit of openness, they actually triaged an incident live on Twitch. So GitLab is all about transparency when it comes to their security program. How does an ISMS get audited and certified? So I have this diagram here. We'll just walk through it clockwise. So you'll have that stage one, and this is when you initially engage with an auditing firm. It's really a document review side of things. So you'll be reviewing your ISMS documentation to make sure that you are meeting those core clause requirements. Then probably within 6 months to a year after that, you'll be going through your stage two, and you'll be resolving kind of any previous findings that you had with your documentation failures and all of the controls that are in scope for your statement of applicability. So after you've completed stage 1 and 2 successfully, you will be officially certified with an ISO 27001 certificate. After that, you move into the surveillance phase. So these are kind of like maintenance audits on an annual basis. They'll be ongoing. They'll be a little bit smaller in scope. They'll be kind of like a group of controls of your statement of applicability while also covering all of those core clause requirements again. So you'll go through your 2 there, you'll have your findings, you'll resolve them, you'll keep plugging along, and then you make it to recertification, which is after your 3-year cycle, you'll do a full comprehensive review of, it's almost a stage 2 again, and then you continue that cycle through. I wanted to provide this because there's a lot of opportunities here. If you are applying for companies that you know require an ISO 27001 experience, or maybe planning to pursue certification, it's good to know where they land in this cycle. It's a great interview question. When I was applying for my current position, I asked them this question, and then I was like, okay, we just completed stage 1. We have stage 2 in like a few months' time. I need to start focusing on controls. How do I deliver as much value when it comes to controls, like mock audits? Like, how do I prepare our teams for that stage 2? Kind of seeing where you land, it gives you an advantage when it comes to applying for those. Getting into the resources side, we have Skilling Up in ISO 27001. I've talked a lot about Advisora. They continue to surprise me with how much free content that they have on ISO 27001 that just requires a login. So they have a lot of free training. Lead auditor, lead implementer. I've actually been looking at their transition training as well, like transitioning from the 2013 version to the 2022. All of these are free, but that exam and certification are going to cost you. That knowledge there is free. And one of my role models was Neil Bridges, and he always said, like, do the free things first. Do all the free content first. So it applies here too in GRC. I did use that article, just walking through that straightforward guide. I wanted to include that link here. The Secure Controls Framework, I wanted to give that a highlight here because it is a open source framework of control mappings from like ISO 27001 and 27002, mapped to NIST, mapped to CIS, mapped to a secure control that they've developed. It's a great way to see how those interconnect. That way, if you came from one background, transitioning into ISO 27001, you're able to kind of relay that. Also, a lot of GRC SaaS tools use this framework because it is open source as like the bedrock of how their product works. So if you know this, you can easily ramp up on whatever solution your company currently has implemented. Per Lego, this is probably the most valuable subscription that I have. It's an ebook library. It's full of 2013 books, but now those 2022 books are coming in. I can't say enough great things about it. There's always new books being added. Their security books are easy to download, keep on multiple devices. I've used this for studying for multiple certifications, or lately I've been getting into like CISSP books just to kind of see how the management side works. It's awesome. Yeah, there's so many books on that platform. I also wanted to include that link there to the ISMS manual that we covered with GitLab. So all that leading up to, I definitely wanted to present something I've been working on with Chris Whitlock is the ISO 27001 reference guide. I've included a QR code here. It's a publicly available document, and it combines all of the resources I've found and put together in one document. So this is all the books that I've referenced. These are the websites I've referenced. It gives kind of a like open breakdown of kind of those core clause requirements that I didn't go into as much detail before. But the whole goal here is to have something that can legally provide like free resources just by associating multiple free, publicly available, and compiling them together. I came from a library science background, so librarians in a particular subject area would develop a reference page. So this is what I was really hoping to gain with this area. And really, the ultimate goal is to collaborate on this document even further and kind of break down those sections into new study groups. Like, say we cover the Annex A control domains using free materials, or we start preparing internal audit documents, audit plans, all built on kind of like that free content that's out there. I do want to keep this as a collaborative effort, so I dropped the link here, but this will be actively worked on in the Study GRC group. And I wanted to make sure that that group was kind of like being able to collaborate and produce changes to this guide and continue to enhance it. So as a recap, we covered an overview of those 27001 and 27002 document standards. We talked about some of those job roles that are in there, like the CISO roles, your risk analyst roles. I focused a little bit more on the internal audit side because that's where I live and breathe. We saw how an ISMS is structured, how it's implemented and certified, and then I wrapped up with those resources for skilling up in your ISO 27001 knowledge. Towards the end, I wanted to give kudos to communities that made this talk happen. So within Simply Cyber's Discord, I helped co-found the Public Speaking Masters group, and we meet the last Tuesday of every month, and it's awesome to see some of the members here in the chat today. Really, we're wanting to cultivate that supported platform for preparing and presenting content, getting some of that feedback, and just building overall speaking confidence. This group has heard me give this talk maybe 3 to 4 times at this point, and they still keep cheering me on. It's been an awesome experience overall. And then I also wanted to promote here the Study GRC group. Awesome to be here. I wanted to make sure that kudos were given to these groups that really inspired this talk and continue to help me develop content regarding ISO 27001. If you want to connect with me, I'm active on LinkedIn, especially for just like GRC, information security things, and Discord. I'm in the Simply Cyber community. I'm in Study GRC. Feel free to message me, send me a friend request. I'd be happy to chat about kind of my experience and how I've been able to get started in keeping current in the industry.